At least 31 people have been killed in violent repressions of anti-government protests in Colombia, while mobilizations are set to continue on Wednesday. Spain's Conservative Popular Party has secured a solid win in the Madrid regional government elections, more than doubling the amount of seats it won in the last vote 2 years ago, while former Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias has announced his quitting politics following his defeat. Iran announces successful trials on humans of a coronavirus vaccine named after the late nuclear scientist Mohsen Faridazadeh. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Colombians are preparing for another day of nationwide mobilizations on Wednesday, despite the threat of repression by state security forces, which, according to the NGO Temblores, which monitors police violence in the country, has resulted in the death of 31 protesters to date. According to the National Strike Committee of Colombia, between April 28th and May 24th, over 1,000 cases of police violence were reported, while 31 demonstrators were killed, 12 of them in Cali, which saw major repression on Monday night. 124 other people were injured, 12 of them with eye injuries caused by police deliberately shooting projectiles at their faces. In addition, 6 acts of sexual violence were reported, as well as over 800 arbitrary detentions. Meanwhile, 45 human rights defenders have been limited in the exercise of their functions. Colombia's Human Rights Ombudsman has also confirmed that the whereabouts of 89 people are still unknown. As of Tuesday night, 10,000 teachers and citizens had signed a petition requesting President Iván Duque to call on the armed forces and the national police to immediately stop the violence against the demonstrators, and that those responsible for the crimes committed against the civilian population to be investigated and punished. In view of the human rights violations that have been registered, the signatories assured that they constitute crimes for which the state must respond. They also demanded respect for the right to peaceful protest and social mobilization established in the Colombian Constitution. They closed the text with a clear message: the rule of law must prevail by following human rights, not otherwise. On Tuesday, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed its deep concern about the events that took place in the southwestern Colombian city of Cali.
We are deeply alarmed at developments in the city of Cali in Colombia overnight, where police opened fire on demonstrators protesting against tax reforms, reportedly killing and injuring a number of people. Our office in Colombia is working to verify the exact number of casualties and establish how this terrible incident came about in Cali. Human rights defenders are also reporting they have been harassed and threatened.
The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has received reports of at least 14 deaths in the violent repression against protesters in Colombia.
Stress also that law enforcement officers should abide by the principles of legality, precaution, necessity, and proportionality when policing demonstrations. Firearms can only be used as a measure of last resort against an imminent threat to life or a serious injury. Since 28 April, the Human Rights Office of the United Nations has received allegations of at least 14 deaths in the context of the protests in different parts of Colombia, including at least 1 police officer.
And now we address other topics. The National Assembly of Venezuela appointed 15 new rectors of the National Electoral Council for the next 7 years. The president of the Venezuelan parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, swore in the new rectors and their substitutes this Tuesday. The 15 members of the council were selected from a list of 103 eligible candidates presented by the Electoral Nominating Committee. Rodriguez noted that the appointment of the new electoral authorities is a sign that all political sectors present in the parliament ratify the country's democratic institutionality. The new electoral council will be responsible for organizing the upcoming elections for state governors and mayors to be held this year. The president of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, stressed the importance of the electoral authority to ensure the upholding of democracy in accordance with the constitution of the country.
This constitution also establishes the creation of the electoral branch as an autonomous public power, as a powerful public power, so that matters that concern the people of Venezuela are settled in a peaceful, democratic, constitutional and electoral way.
And now we move on to Mexico, where this Tuesday emergency services retrieved the bodies of those killed when an elevated metro line collapsed in the capital. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador promised a full investigation into the accident, which raised questions about construction standards on a network used by millions every day. According to Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum, there were several minors among the 24 victims, while dozens were injured. Nearly 80 people received hospital treatment following the dramatic accident, one of the worst to hit the subway system in the capital. Dozens of emergency workers initiated rescue efforts to pull victims out from the carriages, but the works had to be suspended because of fears of the wreckage was too unstable. The efforts later resumed with the help of a crane. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back From the South. Spain's Conservative Popular Party has secured a solid win in the Madrid regional government elections, more than doubling the amount of seats won in the last vote 2 years ago, and returning outspoken hardliner Isabel Díaz Ayuso to the regional presidency. With more than 99% of the vote counted, the Popular Party has secured 65 seats, compared to the 30 it obtained in 2019, and remains 4 seats away from the absolute majority in an election viewed as an indicative of the future political direction of the country. The left, split between 3 parties, has suffered a blow, particularly in the case of the United Weekend Party of former Deputy Prime Minister Pablo Iglesias, who stood down from the national government to run in the regional elections. The party came last with 10 seats, 3 more than in the last vote. The More Madrid Party has been the surprise of the election day, on surpassing the Socialist Workers' Party in votes and securing the same number of seats at 24. The Socialist Workers' Party loses 13 seats in its worst historical result in the community. Meanwhile, the far-right Vox Party rises from 5th to 4th force with 13 representatives, 1 more than in 2019. Meanwhile, the worst predictions were fulfilled in the case of the Citizens Party, which had ruled in a regional coalition with the Popular Party and lost all 26 seats, thus left without representation in the Assembly of Madrid. The regional elections held in the Spanish region of Madrid this Tuesday saw a solid win for the right, with the Conservative Popular Party maintaining its 26-year control of the regional assembly and dealing a blow to progressive sectors in the country. Political scientist Juan Carlos brings us his analysis of the results.
Has won the elections in the Community of Madrid, and everything points to the fact that the government will finally be formed by the Popular Party and the extreme right-wing party Vox. It is still open whether the party sympathetic to the Franco regime will lend its support to the Popular Party without entering the government, but the need that Díaz Ayuso has for the votes of Vox allows to foresee that the vice president of the Community of Madrid will be Rocío Monasterio, member of a party that despises immigrants, that wants parental censorship in schools, that prefers the government of Franco to the current one, that denies that male violence exists, and that has proposed to do everything possible to prevent the right to abortion from being carried out in Madrid. Let us remember that Ciudadanos, a party promoted to stop Unidas Podemos, has been eliminated from the game, without any seats, and its place has been taken by the ultra-right-wing party Vox, which has received economic and media support. The Socialist Party has lost a dozen seats after electing a grey candidate to whom a destination outside Madrid as ombudsman had already been decided before the elections were called. The feeling that the PSOE wanted to lose the election seems evident. With this defeat, it managed to push the PP to the right with Díaz Ayuso, thus weakening its possibility of governing Spain. What the socialist media did not count on is that the support to Más Madrid, which sought to take votes away from Iglesias, was going to end up meaning that it would get a better result in votes than the PSOE, although similar in seats. It seems evident that the ultimate loser of the May the 4th event in Madrid will be democracy. The turnout above 75% does not seem to confirm the hypothesis that pointed to a higher abstention rate due as the elections took place on a working day. The political polarization has left few people at home, although it is true that there is a higher abstention rate in the popular sectors. The earthquake was not only due to the fact that the right wing won the elections by a wide margin, it was also due to the resignation of Pablo Iglesias from the candidate of Unidas Podemos. From all these positions, although Unidas Podemos has significantly increased its results in Madrid, the defeat of the left has led Iglesias to leave his political responsibilities, recognizing that the attacks on his person, unheard of in Spanish democracy since the times of the Second Republic, have ended up hitting his electoral possibilities. Podemos begins a new stage, more feminized, where the vice president of the government, Yolanda Díaz, and the other ministers will have a relevant role. The scenario that lies ahead in Spain is not very optimistic. The Trumpist discourse of Díaz Ayuso, plus the pressure from the extreme right of Vox, is going to turn the Community of Madrid into a battering ram against the coalition government of PSOE and Unidas Podemos. Iglesias is right when he states that Madrid, which has voted for an extreme right wing, does not look like Spain, and the risk of the country burning down from the center is a certain risk. The extreme right lacks a defined program and articulates its policy from the confrontation to the socialist government and Podemos, to immigrants, to the left, to Catalans, Basques, Valencians, women, homosexuals, a speech consolidated by the clear victory in the elections. The May the 4th elections compels all the parties to make a move.
In London, foreign ministers from the Group of 7 wealthy and industrialized nations were received on Wednesday by British Foreign Secretary for a second day of meetings. Talks would focus on attempts to make coronavirus vaccines available around the world. However, the Indian External Affairs Minister won't be attending any of the day's meetings in person because of a possible outbreak of coronavirus in the Indian delegation. The minister stated on his Twitter account an exposure to a possible COVID cases, and as a matter of caution, he decided to conduct the engagements in the virtual mode. Britain's foreign officers, which organized the meeting, did not immediately confirm whether any delegates had tested positive. In Afghanistan, flash floods caused by heavy rains have resulted in the deaths of at least 16 people, including 4 children, while 10 people remain missing, according to local officials. Heavy rains overnight Monday caused severe flooding in 9 provinces, sparking damage to livestock and farmland. The State Ministry for Disaster Management reported in a statement that hundreds of acres of farmland and orchards on nearly 250 houses have been damaged or destroyed in the natural disaster. Relief efforts have begun in the affected provinces, while rescue teams are trying to locate residents who remain missing. Eritrea's president arrived in Khartoum on Tuesday for talks with Sudanese officials amid tensions over a long-time border dispute between Sudan and neighboring Ethiopia. President Isaias Afwerki landed in Khartoum's international airport and was received by General Abdel Fattah Burhan, the head of Sudan's ruling sovereign council. The two leaders then began close talks on cooperation and ways to develop ties between their countries. The decades-long disagreement centers on large swaths of agricultural land that Sudan says are within its borders, but which Ethiopian farmers have cultivated for years. The dispute escalated in November after Sudan deployed troops to the territories it says are occupied by Ethiopian farmers and militias. Sudan and Ethiopia have since held rounds of talks to try and settle the dispute, most recently in Khartoum on December, but have not made progress. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Iran has announced successful trials on humans of a coronavirus vaccine, the Islamic Republic News Agency reported. The vaccine was named Fakhra in memory of the late nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, adding that the scientist's son has participated in the trials as a volunteer. The first clinical trials were developed by the Iranian Defense Ministry Center, which began in March. Iran has developed several domestic coronavirus vaccines so far. Phase 3 trials of the Coviran Baccarat vaccine began in late April. The director of the scientific committee at Iran's Anti-Coronavirus Crisis Center said that the shot might be approved for use in May and other domestic medications could follow in another 2 to 3 months. The Supreme Court of Justice of Argentina has ratified the autonomy of the province of Buenos Aires and entrusted the local government to decide whether to resume classes in the region in the midst of the COVID-19 health crisis. The judicial decision comes after the presidential decree that established restrictions against COVID-19 in the province expired on Friday. The ruling considers that President Alberto Fernandez violated the autonomy of the Argentine capital. Government officials point out that the ruling obeys certain political interests and violates the right of the head of state to issue instructions on public health matters. The court's measure also compels Buenos Aires teachers who are opposed to the resumption of face-to-face classes to reevaluate whether to continue their strike action. President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, criticized the Supreme Court's ruling that leaves the decision regarding the resumption of on-site classes in the Buenos Aires province in the hands of the local government.
United than ever to take care of our children, to take care of our elderly, to take care of all of us, because it is a difficult time, because it is a time where there is definitely a virus that, as Axel likes to say, the human eye does not see, but that attacks in a merciless way, not only health, but also life and the economy of the peoples. That is the real enemy that we face. Nothing that we do is to complicate anyone's life. We do it to preserve the health and the lives of our peoples, and against that, they can dictate any sentence they want.
President Fernandez called for the population and his supporters to unite in order to mitigate the effects of the pandemic and to preserve the lives of citizens.
We will continue to take care of the health of Argentine men and women, no matter how many sentences they write. I am a man who loves the rule of law and who defends the rule of law and who respects judicial sentences as well. I have been teaching law in the city of Buenos Aires for over 30 years. You do not know how sad I am to see the deterioration of the law transformed into sentences.
Brazil's former health minister told a Senate inquiry this Tuesday that President Jair Bolsonaro repeatedly ignored warnings that his response to the coronavirus pandemic risks causing the country's health system to collapse. Luis Enrique Mandetta, who resigned in April 2020 after clashing with Bolsonaro over COVID-19, bluntly criticized his former boss in testimony to a Senate commission investigating whether the far-right leader's administration has mismanaged the health crisis by snubbing expert advice on containing the coronavirus and also failing to ensure enough vaccines and medical supplies. Bolsonaro faces backlash from downplaying COVID-19 as a little flu, flouting expert advice on face masks and stay-at-home measures, resisting vaccines, and touting medications such as hydrochloroquine that studies have found are ineffective against the virus.
expressly recommend the Presidency of the Republic change its stance, following the recommendations of Health Ministry, since the adoption of measures in the opposite direction may generate a collapse of health system and very serious consequences for the health of the Brazilian population. Regarding whether Health Ministry was under pressure in the first question, no, but it was confronted. It was publicly confronted, and that gave the society dubious information. The objective of Health Ministry was to give information, and the President, Jair Bolsonaro, gave other information. Brazil could do more. The health system could do more. We could do more. We could have been vaccinating since last November.
And Brazilian microbiologist Natalia Pasternak blamed President Jair Bolsonaro for the current health crisis in the country, which has reported the second highest COVID-19 death toll in the world at over 400,000.
Changed 4 ministers. We had 4 health ministers in just over a year during the pandemic. And the reason for this change was predominantly ministers who did not agree with him about the need for restrictive measures and the protocol of care with chloroquine, ivermectin, and all the miracle cures. So yes, the attitude of the president has contributed a lot to reach the state of calamity. He hindered the vaccine purchase negotiations. We never had awareness campaigns on the use of masks or about mobility restrictions. The Brazilian population still doesn't know very well how to self-isolate in case of illness.
Meanwhile, the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo residents have begun eating out at restaurants and going shopping in stores, with extended opening hours as measures introduced to stem the spread of the coronavirus are eased. The reopening has been criticized by health experts who stress that the country is experiencing the worst stage of the pandemic.
Completely disconnected from reality. We are in a stage of the pandemic that can be considered the worst stage in Brazil. We shouldn't be celebrating and opening up. We are in a much worse moment than other times when we were closing everything, and other countries, if they had our average number of deaths, would be closing. It's COVID-19, a disease that depends on people's behavior. It's a disease of society. So if people's behavior is too relaxed with family gatherings, meets up without wearing masks, we think that the curve will go back up.
On a day like today, 40 years ago, Northern Ireland's Republican patriot and fighter Bobby Sands died prisoner of the British after 66 days of a hunger strike. Sands was a member of the Irish Republican Army. He was the first of 10 jailed IRA hunger strikers to die in the protest, aimed at vindicating dignity while in prison, such as the right of free association with other prisoners and right to visits, letters and parcels. The then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher chose to let them die, but their resolve and sacrifice led to a strategic surge of the Northern Irish struggle for independence from England. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.